Hey Phyllis, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay. Hey guys, welcome. Hey, we'll get started here. We're going to wait a few minutes to allow others to join, and then we'll start. Probably just a couple minutes after 12. Is everybody getting used to their new normal? No?
Yeah, it's definitely weird, but I'm going to be rude and eat lunch in the middle of this, so I'll keep myself on mute for a while.
Hey, that's quite all right. I've been in and out of these Zoom meetings like a million times over the last couple weeks, and I'm in a dark bedroom, so I'm trying to illuminate my face a little bit without being like creepy or something, because if I don't do that, it looks like I'm in a witness protection program. You know, my face is real dark and it's really bizarre. But my family, I have a note on the door. So hopefully they know there's like two different Zoom meetings. There's one where I'm on mute and I'm listening and they can come in and say, hey, do we have any syrup for pancakes? And then there's another kind where I'm doing some of the talking and they can't do that. Sometimes they forget and they come in anyways. So I will apologize in advance for that. I would send them out, but I can't. They have to stay home with me.
I will say I had to resort to wearing the hat because the balding has reached the point now that with light, it starts to create a glare off my forehead. And I was like, nope, that's not going to be a thing. So it's going to be the backwards hat, and I'm going to look like the least professional teacher on the planet, and I don't care.
It's quite all right. I thought it would be cool. Does everybody know how to open up chat? If you can open up the chat, I thought it would be cool to see where everybody is from. So just to give you, as people are joining here, a little background. I'm on the EdCamp team, and we all started in Olathe, and we were really looking at a EdCamp for people like us in our county. And so the idea really came from Ariel, and she was the person that kicked off our meeting this morning with our live session with Randy Watson. And since then, we're trying to branch out because we really don't want it to be just an Olathe thing. We want it to be a whole county, a whole state, a whole USA, a whole world thing. Like, we don't want to say, oh, because you're not from our area, you can't join in. And it looks like we've got some Blue Valley, Olathe, Texas. Hey, Jennifer, that's awesome. And Shelly is here from Chisholm. Shelly, we saw each other in January, right? Yeah. Lakewood Middle is Blue Valley. Great Bend, all right. There we go. Is it Sabetha or Sabetha? How is that? Prairie Hills.
Sabetha is how it's pronounced.
Okay, thank you. I'm not good with the pronunciation. Before Google and you could look that up quickly, I was horrible. I would mispronounce everything. So anyways, oh, we got Pipers in the house too. Awesome. So anyways, we, you know, with the whole stay-at-home order and stuff and schools being shut down, we are normally, actually, this is just our second year. The first year we were a physical camp. And we switched to virtual. So we have had a huge turnout, which is amazing. I'm going to maybe vote to keep virtual because it feels like you can participate in a lot more and when you want to at your own pace, which is, I think, is cool. And the EdCamp thing, you know, is you come here and get what you need when you need it. So, all right, we're at about 12:03. I know we may have people popping in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, if that's okay. And I want to show you a few things. My intention today is that I kind of just give you the basics really quick of PBL. I know we've got people in the house here that have PBL experience, which is awesome, all the way to people who don't know a lot about PBL. So I want to breeze through that and just let you know that I've shared all these resources with you. So the slides presentation you will have access to. I broke probably the cardinal rule about doing a slides presentation, and I put a ton of stuff on it with the intention that it would be less that maybe you would have to write down. You could just go back and refer to it as you need or as things came up. So this is our live board, which I'm sure you guys have seen. And so our PBL is titled middle and high, but I will also address elementary. So I put PBL for all grades. So this is probably how you got, or probably the calendar link is probably how you got to this session, maybe. But if you click on this thing here, it will bring up this page for you, and it'll be here forever and ever. And these first things are my products, my things that I've created. So I've given you access to some PBLs that I've written and implemented myself. You're welcome to copy and take anything that you need from them. And then down here, we've got some other resources from PBL Works. So those are all available to you at any time, even after this weekend going forward. So I wanted to let you know that. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. Again, I'm going to breeze through this. This is something I'm super passionate about, and you know, I always try to ask myself the question about, you know, if somebody came to my classroom who didn't know a lot about my school or about me or my students, and they just sat in the back or in the front or wherever they walked in, what would they see? Well, how would they see me interacting with my students? What would my students be doing? What are the things that I'm doing to bring education to a deeper level, a more meaningful level? And that's kind of how I started down this path of personalized PD. And, you know, I think this conference specifically, and doing things like this for yourself as a teacher and finding the time to do it, which is really difficult. Although now I feel like I've got a little bit more time on my hands and have been having fun with this just because I've been forced to stay at home and not go and do the things that I normally do. But doing stuff like this and personalized PD really has revolutionized the way that I do business in my classroom. So I would encourage you to, you know, seek people out, make those connections on Twitter, follow Google, follow PBL Works, follow all of that great stuff. I saw a presentation today by Amy Hillman over student engagement, and I plan to go back and look at her. I follow her. I just had never heard her before, and it was amazing. So if you're in the house right now, Amy, that's amazing stuff that you were sharing. So just a little bit about me. I'm at Olathe West, and PBL is one of the things that's really helped me change my class, and to the point where I've been teaching since 1997, and probably those first students that I had would probably not recognize my classroom if they remembered anything at all about what we did. In fact, I sometimes think I should probably go back to those students and apologize for what I may have or may not have put them through. So today I'm going to share how PBL has changed my life and my classroom. So I found this picture a couple years ago, and I really liked it because PBL is a little bit outside of the box. It's not your traditional stuff. And so you have to be willing to try something like that and even be vulnerable to what happens if it doesn't go well. And that's okay, because that will probably happen. And you just tweak things. It's like you normally do, like you do a lesson first hour and it doesn't go that great. And so when your second hour kids come in, you have fixed all that and your second hour lesson goes that much better. So with PBL, it's like the Hubba Bubba tape. Oh my God, that's not how you're supposed to eat it. You're supposed to unwind it. Well, who says that? Like, you can take a big hunk off, and sometimes PBL is like that. So really quickly, differences between projects and PBL. I think the way that PBL is set up, you're going to get that, but really it's student directed. And so that's where you're going to get your excitement, your buy-in from your kids, with your student voice and choice. It is not some abstract, ambiguous thing they're doing. What we'll talk about is, if they're learning and they're creating a flyer, you have to go that next step and share that flyer. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But this is something too that not all kids may do the same thing. So I'm going to show you how to lead them down a path where you may get a bajillion different topics and a bajillion different products, and that's okay. That kind of makes it interesting, really. Interesting to manage, but really interesting when they get all done, because they're not all the same. And you haven't dictated to them, number one, what their topic is, and number two, what you want them to produce. Okay, so like anything, you're going to pick your standards. So I think it'd be probably beneficial if you would, start thinking about, is there a lesson or a unit that you have that just needs to be jazzed up a little bit? And what could you do to jazz up that lesson? Would a PBL work? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay too. So with your standards, they can be content standards, but probably because of the public product portion of it, you're going to be teaching the soft skills, the life skill lessons and stuff that kids need that will transcend this project, your class, even high school or middle school or elementary school, those things that they need to know as people in the world. So this is an example. I'm just going to share this with you really quick. A PBL I did a couple years ago. So I'm from Olathe, Kansas. It is a suburb outside of Kansas City, and our city was established in the late 1850s. And we're not that big. I'm not sure of the exact population, 130, maybe 150,000. And we have a lake that's very old. It's been around for a long time. It's a man-made lake. And the city recently embarked on a multi-million-dollar plan to revamp it. It is right down the street from our school, which was kind of neat. And so sometimes when I do a PBL, I'll sit and think, what's going on in the world that I could possibly get my students involved in. And so this project, unfortunately, it really isn't something that I could repeat, and that's okay. But I thought, okay, I'm going to reach out to my principal and figure out, is there anybody at the city of Olathe, that would talk to me about this lake project? I teach world geography, and I thought there's a little bit of an overlap. I can see how some of my standards would fit, right? And anyway, I got hooked up with a guy named Mike Latka, and it was really cool. He had all kinds of cool things for my kids to do. I have found that people out in the business world or in other institutions welcome school kids, teenagers, littles, middle school, all kids into their industry and into their world. So Mike came out and he did a big kickoff presentation about what it is to be a landscape architect, what kind of schooling you need, what his job looks like, and he gave us an overview of what the lake project was going to be. And he said, there's two things, though, that we need help with. We are designing a nature-based playground and a nature-based spray ground. And we don't know what it's going to look like yet. And in fact, we don't know what the kids are going to really want. You know, everybody knows kids like to climb and they like water, but what specific features could they be involved in, or would they prefer? And how could we involve, you know, your class, Mrs. Fishburn? And so what we came up with was they had to research the topography of the land, and they put together a team and they got to pick to do the spray ground or the playground. And so they had to research the whole thing. They had to look at data from little kids and what the kids preferred to see on a playground, the climbing things, the splash areas, and so forth. Can you hear my dog? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Anyway, we looked at everything from like exactly what is a nature playground. It's not plastic molded logs for kids to climb on. It's actual nature. I learned that. I didn't know that. My kids learned that. And then we also looked at the ADA and how a kid in a wheelchair could still access the playground. And so it was very multifaceted. We looked at all kinds of stuff. You can see, if you can see the picture in the middle, the kids learned eye contact. They learned how to shake hands. Mike came out to the school a couple times and met with each group, and they went through, like they had real blueprints. Like it was really above and beyond what I expected. Then their culminating thing was they created Google Slides over all of their research and what they wanted to build. They created a 3D design, and then they went to the City Hall chambers and presented to a group of 7 people that were in some way, shape, or form associated with the whole project. So really cool. And then our goal is to get out there and see what parts and pieces that they picked from each project. But the contractor from the whole project invited the kids out to come and check it out and look at it. So really, really cool connections. I saw kids who, you know, they don't normally dress up. You can see the pictures. They all look nice. And it, you know, it was kind of a high stakes thing. They're presenting to 7 adults they don't know. I had no groups or kids come to me and say, I can't do this. They all did it, but I set the bar pretty high for that. And they all, you know, that was a lot of prep. So they all really engaged in that and did awesome. Sometimes it doesn't work that well, and that's okay too. So the second element is a driving question. And so it's got to be open-ended. There can't be a right or wrong answer. If your driving question kind of stinks, then the project's probably not going to go that well, especially if it's not open-ended. So here are some, when you go back, you can look at these driving questions that I've written, as well as there's this little tool here. It's called the Tubric, and you can make it out of paper. You can print it and make it, and it helps you, you move all these pieces, and it helps you with action words and types of outcomes and stuff. So you can design your driving question to be very effective for your project. Some of my driving questions are not that great. I mean, I am certainly no expert at this. I had the opportunity to go to PBL World and be trained over a 3-day period, which was awesome and amazing, but it was very overwhelming, and a lot of it I had to kind of learn on the fly, and so make those adjustments. So that's really what I want to share with you. The sustained inquiry piece is like the research. And so the big difference with PBL is that the kids' research should lead them down another path where they ask more questions. So their research will actually, if you've got a good driving question, generate more questions. It'll keep them, they won't be like done, if you know what I mean. They keep going. So the sustained inquiry, I would get your library media specialist in your room to support you. Have her or him do a quick presentation about how to find resources and how to cite sources, They may even like to talk to kids about presentations in particular and putting those together. So, I mean, we have a great library media specialist, Melanie Massey, who comes into our room and does some awesome things. And I know a lot of the library specialists love to do that kind of stuff. They love to work with kids, especially in a classroom when they really don't have that opportunity too much. The authenticity piece here is key too. There are 8 elements actually. We're almost about halfway through with them. This is the part where I take the kids to the city hall and they do the presentation. Now it can be super huge, or you can do things at school too. There's lots of wiggle room here. The big thing is that there's some sort of real life connection. So here is a list of things where, they might create a PowerPoint or a poster, and those might be more like projects. So for PBL, you want to amp that up a little bit, and the distributed flyer is going to be the big thing. A blog that is shared, a proposal, and this was what the kids did. They did the proposal for Olathe Lake. So there's many things. I just threw a couple items up here for you to come back and look at later. And this is the magic. I have a friend on. If I move this around for a second, thanks. Okay, I have a friend that I do Olathe Spark Starters podcast with, and the EdCamp team, and he has a book coming out this summer called Awesome Sauce, published by ITZY. Which
Yay!
Is cool. Yay, Josh Stock. So that's really cool. And I would say this is the magic. This is the awesome sauce. This is where your kids get to choose. They get to choose sometimes the topic and a lot of times the product. So I would say as much as you can, PBL is more student-based, projects are more teacher-based. When you can get comfortable stepping back and giving kids that control, they're going to buy in to it and be more invested, and you're not going to have to really prod them much to do their work. They need your guidance, they need your facilitation, absolutely. But I'm sorry, I'm looking to see, we have some chats here. But you're going to have to do less of that for sure when you give them that choice. So here's a couple tasks that I put in here. I want to talk to you too about the roles for kids. So the first time I did this, I did no roles. And I put kids in groups when they had no relationships with each other. We were a semester class, we were brand new, and it was scary, you guys. It was kind of like a train wreck. And I was like, oh Lord, what have I done? Like, I wanted to completely abort mission and say, okay, never mind, let's do something else. And that was with that big Olathe Lake project where the stakes were really high. I had a group of girls and they didn't like each other. I don't know if they didn't like each other. They didn't know each other very well. They didn't trust each other. And so their first 3 meetings, they just sat there and stared at each other and didn't say anything. And I was like, this is a disaster. And so instead of solving their problem for them, I let them be uncomfortable. In my teacher self, I feel like I was probably 100 times more uncomfortable than they were watching that. But by the end of the time, they were building their 3D model, and they were laughing and talking and having a good time, and they had formed a relationship. It was very dangerous that I did that at the very beginning of the semester. That was one of the big things I learned is don't do that. If your kids have a relationship with each other, they know, at least know each other's names. That will serve you very well. So I gave you some examples for slides, or for roles rather. I apologize. But every group has a blogger, and that's a way that they kind of document their journey as they go through this PBL process. And they, there's some jobs that they all must do. Like the research cannot fall on the shoulders of one person. One person can't do the presentation all by themselves. If they're in groups of 4, which I found to be kind of the sweet spot there, then they all get a job, plus they all research and present in some way, shape, or form. One student's role might not be saying a lot of stuff during the presentation, and I think that's okay. I don't know that it has to be spread equally. But roles are going to be really important. That was one of the things that I missed on, which I've done roles before. I don't know why I did that, but I did it. The reflection piece is also a part of PBL, and you want your kids reflecting. And I think this is also a really good life skill. Like I reflect all the time. When we get done here, I'm going to reflect upon like what I think went well, what I think didn't go well, how maybe I talked too much, or whatever it was. I'll do all of that reflecting because I can be my own like biggest criticizer sometimes, right? So reflection's huge. The thing is, there's 2 things actually. For reflection, don't do it too much because it loses its value, and don't skip it altogether. This is probably the easiest element to cut out and not do. The reflection should really come probably weekly, either individually and or in their group. Definitely at the end though. But I think if you only do it at the end, you're missing a big opportunity for them to reflect on like week 2, what went well and maybe what didn't go well, and to fix it in week 3. So reflection is important, and especially not to cut out. Okay, critique and revision. So this, I think, for high school and middle school, we really have to pre-teach. Elementary school kids can do this too. Elementary school kids can do every single one of these elements. I've seen it done before. But your kids best, and you have to tailor it and curtail it to what works with your kids. So the critique and revision can come a few different ways. In this slides presentation, this is a thing about Austin's butterfly. And Austin was, he was young, like 1st or 2nd grade. And it basically is a video that you can show your kids if you want. I showed my high schoolers how getting really good feedback can help you as a person, especially in this, create for Austin a better butterfly. So what it does is Austin draws of his first butterfly. That's his first attempt. And then he shows it to his classmates. And then they say, okay, he's trying to draw this yellow, pretty yellow and black one up here. And so they give him some advice. Oh, you forgot these little pointy things. And so his second attempt, he definitely gets those pointy things in there. By the time he's done, holy cow, look at his butterfly. It's beautiful. And it's all about the feedback. So let me go back. For the feedback, the pre-teaching is huge. And it seems kind of silly sometimes. Like, how do you tell somebody that you like part of their project without saying that was dope? Because your kids will do that. If they're in high school, they'll say that's lit, that's legit. Well, we want really specific things. So I have found teaching them how to do this is giving them some first, in their first attempt, giving them some things to tell each other. I like the way that you blah, 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 blah. I wonder if blah, 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 blah. And so you give them those little stems and then they complete them. So what this will look like is this can look like a gallery walk, and I'll get to that here in a second. So I want you to remember the part about the feedback because that'll be important. And you may have a knucklehead that'll still do it. And honestly, a little conversation to that person, they're like, oh dang, like she did look at that and she did see that. And then we have a quick conversation and they don't do it again. But they're kids and they're going to do that sometimes. Okay, The public product, this is the part where I said it could be in your building. You can invite people in. If you can get several teachers to do this, like on your team, or like all the social studies teachers, or all, the ELA teachers or whatever, for a few grades, you could invite the parents in for an evening to look at the projects. We do that. It's called an exhibition night. And so that's a really nice way for kids to kind of show off. You don't have to give each kid the stage though. It could be in the library. It could be in the cafeteria. They could have a little part of a table and they set it up and they just simply, they're like on display with their stuff. And then people wander around and mingle. And then when they come up, that's their opportunity to introduce themselves and have eye contact and just walk them through what they did and what they learned and why it was important. So you can do that during your class period or during a little part of the day. You could do that in the evening. You can share things. Kids can make a website, and that's actually a global audience. Kids could do a video or a blog. So there's lots of ideas here and ways that you can do the public product. That's probably, all these things are important, but that's usually what's missing when there is a project, is the public product. Okay, so this is a calendar I wanted to share with you. And this is a project that I do in my world history class. And we cover roughly the Renaissance till the Cold War in a school year. And so this one is actually called History, Her Story. It's kind of a play on words. And the kids are able to pick any topic in history. World history, American history, Jewish history, I don't care. Anything. Their goal is to create or pick some sort of event or time period and connect it back to themselves. Like how do they personally connect with that? So a lot of kids will pick something that connects to their family. So for instance, I had a girl whose grandma was involved in the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s. And she recreated a poster, like a really famous poster from a march. It was really cool. And she interviewed her grandma and, learned more about her grandma and made that connection. So kids do a lot of that kind of stuff. I've even had kids pick like the history of baseball, which at first I was like, okay. But really, when I really thought about it, I'm like, well, why wouldn't I do that? Like there's a lot of interesting history with that. And so that student picked a grandparent and interviewed his grandpa, and his product was he had some baseball equipment, including his grandpa's glove from like 60 years ago, and had his to compare. Like it was just really cool. So this project, kind of the sky's the limit. But it's not in my curriculum. Like a lot of this stuff is stuff that I wouldn't normally cover. But to me, I was okay with that because the students were invested more and they did a wonderful job. So what I do when I introduce a PBL is I give them, I plan it all out in terms of what they have due when. So I would encourage you to do a project calendar. Do your kickoff, go large, go big. Go big or go home on the kickoff. Show them a video clip. Do anything that you can to make the kickoff memorable. And then these words here, the idea generator and the idea pitch and the gallery walk, all of that stuff is shared for you on that document. So you have access to all of that. The other thing about PBL is once they get in it and they start working, it's not necessarily every day, although you could do that. You could make your PBL unit big. You can make your PBL unit really long like mine. But there's still some teaching going on. So on these blank days, we're doing our regular curriculum work. But then, because this project here, everybody had a different topic, like how do you teach that, right? So we talked about the different types of history because everybody was encountering that in some way, shape, or form. We did oral tradition, we did culture, we did historical bias. We did how to analyze primary sources because they were coming across a lot of that, down to soft skills. And specifically, we practiced now with the coronavirus and everything. I'm not sure we're going to be practicing shaking hands, but we did that for the first part of our class one day. We just went around and shook hands. And it was kind of silly at first, but it helped. We talked about a wet noodle hand, right? Or a nice firm handshake. So that stuff kids like too, and need that kind of, like, when else are they going to learn that, right? Okay, so here's your pro tips. I'm going to go fast, and then we're going to have discussion time. So we're about 33 minutes in, and I really wanted to give time. I can't figure out how to get back to the questions because I didn't even see them. So I need to do that too. But I wanted to give time for other people who have experience with PBL to jump in and give their pointers, as well as, if you have questions and so forth. So the backwards design thing I think is really important for PBL is you just consider what are your resources you already have available. So the Lake Olathe PBL, it really went amazingly. Had that not been going on, I wouldn't have had that project to do. So those are just those natural things that are occurring in your community. If you can connect your kids to another building or to some sort of project going on in your city or your county, those are great opportunities. I would also, when you network and you have connections, who do you know that works in what industry? And would they like to have fifth graders come out and give a presentation, or 11th graders? And then network with other teachers. Hey, do you know anybody in the current criminal industry, like doing crime scene analyzation or whatever? What are those opportunities that you have access to? So the standards we've already addressed, those are going to be not only your curricular standards, but your soft skills too are really important, just almost as important for real, right? Because those are your life skills. The third one is just like thinking about, like, as you're sitting there and you're listening to this, what unit do you have that you could maybe try a PBL in? And that doesn't mean you throw out all of your instruction. You're going to be instructing as you go. But is there one that kind of lends itself to be PBL already? Or are there some resources in your community where that would fit nicely? But I would say, if it doesn't fit, don't force it because it doesn't turn out well. Just say, well, this is not a unit that's going to work well for PBL. So find a different unit or find a different standard. I would definitely encourage you to pair up with another teacher in a different discipline, outside your department, outside your school, across your district. Those are really cool because now look at us Zooming. We can Zoom with another classroom and talk to them and ask them questions and have those relationships, and then check on each other later in the school year too. Like, how cool is that? Because high school kids love little kids and little kids love high school kids. It's like the perfect combination, right? The sweet spot. I don't know who said this. I can't take credit for this. The only person I know that said this is Megan Black. She's our assistant principal. She said you have to find the sweet spot, not the sweat spot. So do you know what I mean? Like, there's just that area where it is just too overwhelming for kids and you're pushing them too hard. There's too much. And then there's that sweet spot that you hit where it's just the right amount and it keeps them focused and driven, and it's not like, oh, not again, right? And I think this too, like, I do one PBL with my class the entire year, or maybe one a semester. I think the number of PBLs you do that can be a sweat spot. Like, you can overdo the PBL for sure. In some areas. Now, some classes are like entirely PBL because that's what their content is and that's what it lends itself to. For me, I can't do it. So I have to be careful. In our building, we have a lot of people doing PBL. So I have to be cognizant of that too, because if I'm doing one and they have two other teachers that are doing them, that's a lot for a student to manage along with their regular studies. So find the sweet spot, not the sweat spot. And that would include your instruction, your assessments, your reflection, just any part of PBL. Now, those 8 elements, if you're not ready to jump in, totally cool. Pick one of those elements. Like, could you pick reflection? If your kids aren't reflecting and you're not teaching them how to do that, just try that one element of PBL and see how that feels. And you can baby step your way to adding another element. I think that's great. I did that initially too. And then just kicking off your project the right way. All right, so these are the gallery walk things. So do you remember when I said reflection, or not reflection, criticism, and how you have to teach your kids how to do this? So this is a way where the kids take a piece of butcher paper and they just basically break down what their plan is. So you do this early on, like week 1 or 2. And a cool thing you can do is play some music. Kids walk around with a Post-it note after you've taught them what to write on their Post-it note, and then they just read these. So I would say, initially I started out, hey, write something for everybody's project. Well, then that is like the sweat spot, you know what I mean? So then I started doing, okay, you have 5 Post-its. Go around the room, read 5 different projects, write 1 good piece of feedback, write your name, so I know which ones that you did your 5. And then that also helped me to go back and say, hey, was dope really what you had to, is there something else that we could be more specific? Oh yeah, Fishburn, sorry, kind of just testing me to see if I was gonna like actually look. So these are some pictures. These are actually done by teachers. And this is what we did at PBL World. So I thought this would be nice to include, because you could maybe look through here and read them and see what, somebody else from across the country was working on at that time. So there's lots to do there. I left you this with your Post-its, an I wonder and an I like statement. Your I wonder could be a piece of criticism, but it's not, I think that's stupid. It's, I wonder if you could write letters to blah, 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 blah. So it's more productive than, just an I don't like, or I like this, or I like that. Okay, so let me stop my screen sharing here. Okay, oh, we have lots of comments. So this is my first, is this my first Zoom? This is my first Zoom meeting. So thank you guys for being patient with me. I am going to just sit and listen. So, and then I see that we have people on here that were sharing awesome things. So that's amazing. When we get done here, I'm gonna share this, save it and share it. I'll put it in our thing for us so that we all have access to it. Would anybody like to hop in with a question? Or it looks like we have like ThingLink and Flipgrid and stuff. So I'm gonna turn it over to whoever would like to share their experiences or ask a question.
I actually had a question. When you talked about blogging, what platform were you using?
I was using Blogspot. So in the packet of resources, here, I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm sorry. I want to show you something. Okay, so let me get out of here. This thing here, let's see. I think this might be the whole thing. The directions are on here for you, along with pictures for your kids. So, like I said, feel free to use any of this. The idea generator is on here for you. And then I became really, really specific about what I wanted them to blog about, because I learned they didn't know what to write about. They had no idea how to even get started. So I gave them some little items here to consider. I also asked them to go to our Knowledge Center and have things proofread by their peers. So they had 3 blog posts to write. And if it's not in here, it might not, but you have access to all this. So I will share, I'll put in there how to create the blog. But it was one person's job to update that and keep that going. And I liked the connection that it gave them with people out on the internet, and that they could share it with other teachers or their parents or whatever. So I don't know. I haven't used another one besides Blogspot. I've had kids create a website and put their blog on their website. But do you have another one that you like to use?
Not really. That's why I was asking. We haven't found a good fit for middle schools. Kind of that weird in between, where it's almost okay, but there's still some safeguards you want to put in place. Um, so if anybody else has anything,
Josh, have you looked at like Blogger or even using Seesaw, the blogging part of Seesaw?
Seesaw was what I was thinking about doing, just because it's more secure. With my newspaper class, we've just used Weebly websites, and the kids created their own websites, and then I just had to be an editor of that. And that worked well for my newspaper kids, but they were my 8th graders, whereas my 6th graders, I think I might feel more comfortable with that piece of just doing like Seesaw, where it's more self-contained.
Yes.
I wonder if a Google Sites setup could work fine, where they submit it like as almost like once it's all published and proofread, and have it then just published to the web as like a doc that can't be edited, and then you just post a link on a Google Sites forum, and then people could access the posts as we go, or as they go.
So you're talking about like one site that I control, and then they send it to me?
Yeah, essentially you act as the editor of that site, and all you have to do is just simply post the link to the actual document. They do all the writing. You're just creating a link.
That makes sense.
Josh, we have a teacher that uses.
Josh, is there a reason you're afraid of Blogger?
There wasn't in particular, other than I just have to worry about like making sure they turn off comments, or it's mainly more parent concerns. So addressing that with parents, how to make sure that it's a secure site. With my newspaper class, it was easier to manage because it was like, 12 kids. And so I could go through and individually make sure that each website I had access to it. Parents knew about the website. But with 115 kids, it's a little bit more cumbersome to manage all that, and making sure that they're being secure and doing that digital citizenship piece as well.
Another one to look at is GoBubble. Just to have that privacy and security a little bit. You can set it up similar to like what you would do with Google Classroom.
I've used Google Sites where I have them upload stuff into like a Google Drive shared folder. You can make it private by putting the kids' emails in, or just share a link, or you can make it public for everybody.
Awesome. Does anybody have a PBL that they've had an issue or a roadblock that they'd like to share, how they kind of creatively managed that?
I've done one the last couple of years on 19th century reform movements and how they continue to impact today. So the students I give them a choice of one of 5: prison reform, women's rights, temperance/drug abuse reform, mental health reform, and the public school movement. So things that emerged in the 1820s to the 40s. I have to research the history of the movement, picking out kind of significant events that happened from the time it was started to the present day, significant leaders, look at how voting changes cause reform movements to emerge. Then they have to find what are some current issues, or at least one current issue that this shows this reform movement still has a lasting legacy. And then they have to devise a solution for how government at some level, be it state, local, or federal, could better address that particular issue. The hardest part I found for 8th graders is that last piece, is understanding what are solutions that are really workable. For example, with issues of equal pay, there are common things like, well, we just passed a law mandating equal pay. I'm like, okay, we've got to get deeper than that. How do we get into that? So I think finding kind of resources there. I think if I had to look at it again, I think that would be a good time to try to contact actual like state and maybe even national representatives to actually do some kind of a Skype session and talk with kids about how that actually process works.
I think that's awesome. I think one thing about PBL is, it gives you more freedom as a teacher to interact with each kid and make that learning more personal. And I don't know that I thought it was going to give me more time. I thought it, but I just was really, really busy. Like every class, I was, because you're interacting with all kids all the time. And so, and you're like, oh, you hear, oh, my kids are working on a project, so I'm not doing anything. PBL is definitely not like that. Like, you're with them, you're facilitating all of that learning all the time. And a lot of them need a lot of guidance and direction. So that was one thing. I don't know that it surprised me, but just one thing I noticed is, wow, man, after that day and I did PBL, whew, I'm tired. The other thing was, I didn't really touch on too much, but just, I think you probably got the gist from the calendar, and that is you have some sort of structure for your kids so that, it doesn't feel loosey-goosey. Like, you have that structure for kids, especially, SPED kids, ELL kids that need like scaffolding or extra supports or whatever. PBL is perfect because, that's differentiation. I can manage my my requirements for each kid based on where I'm meeting them at, because I'm meeting them all at different places, right? And that's okay too. I think that's the beauty of PBL. I do keep track of all my conferences and interactions with my group. So I know, because there are some times where it takes a long time and I don't get to everybody in one day. So I want to make sure that I get to everybody. So I definitely keep track of all of that. And also what we talk about. So in the packet, there's some little forms that I actually write down and give them feedback and sign off on it, so that if you've got 150 kids and you're trying to manage all those projects, it's easy for me. It might be my old brain, but it's easy for me to forget. So I write all of that stuff down.
Actually, for my forensic science class, when I have them do a project, because I have 32 kids in there, I make them send me a calendar invite for I have office hours. It's just times where I'll meet with them. And then I make them type out the notes of what we did, because they have a secretary is a role in their group. So I have found when you have an overwhelmingly large class, I just kind of turn that responsibility over to them. So they know that they have a deadline that they set, and they send me that calendar invite for a time during one of our classes. And that worked pretty well for me.
For those of you that do PBL, do you have projects where there's an opportunity to connect with another classroom? Because I'm all for that. And I'm sure there's other people in here that would be, we don't even have to be in the same state, right? There's all kinds of ways we can connect. So do we have any conversations about that? Or would you like to share a PBL that you did that you liked a lot, that you'd like maybe somebody else would like to? Oh, on that note, before I forget, you should have editing rights on that paper. So if you have resources that you want to add to it, feel free to do that. Okay. Because I would love to learn from you guys too. And I think if we can learn from each other, our students benefit, right?
Hey, Julie, one
Yes.
thing, when you save your recording, it also saves the chat if you've got that marked in your default settings. It'd be
Okay.
kind of interesting to share the chat as well.
Definitely.
I've been on the receiving end of some of these PBL projects. I can't remember what school he was at, but there was a high school science teacher who they did a project in Minecraft, and they were researching Mount Everest. And so they researched Mount Everest, and then he saw online that my kids were actually reading a story about a kid who climbs up Mount Everest. And so he sent the links to all of their Minecraft videos, and then my kids got to watch all these videos on Minecraft. He sent the link through Flipgrid, so my kids were able to watch their videos and then respond to those. So it was a really cool project. So if you are in the upper grades, contact middle elementary teachers, because my kids thought it was the coolest thing that these high schoolers were talking to them. Plus it was in Minecraft. So reaching out to some of your elementary and middle school colleagues it was really cool on my end. And it was also nice because I had zero work on my end. It was just, I had to help the kids get logged in, and then they got to experience all the learning from the high school kids. And I just sat back and watched and facilitated.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. I actually had a student, we were doing a kind of just a Zoom chat Thursday with our team. We were asking them how things were going, and she said her older sister, who's in AP US history, was struggling with stuff on the civil rights movement. And she said, well, hey, we kind of looked at some of that stuff as we were looking at things in 8th grade history. And so my 8th grade student was able to help her older sister with some of her AP US history work because we had done some of these kinds of project based things. I shared in the chat, there's a guy named Trevor Muir who wrote a book called The Collaborative Classroom, and he has some awesome resources that are available. His book's really good. It's really easy read. But if you go to his website, and I put the thing in the chat, he'll even you do get signed up to his blog, but essentially what he does, or I guess it's not really his blog, you just get signed up and he sends it to you in a Google folder of just all of his resources that he uses, from project management logs to creating contracts and group norms and all of that. So he's a good resource.
Definitely. And I think, trying something new can be scary sometimes, especially if it's outside of your comfort zone. And I would just say, don't be afraid to do that. Even if it's just in a small way. I think, when we push that, we grow when we feel uncomfortable like that and we try anyway. And I mean, I'm definitely not an expert. I'm still learning. Everything that I did this year, I was still tweaking, and I've been teaching for like 23 years. So the same thing goes with PBL. I do things and sometimes they fall flat, and then I come back at it after I reflect and I come back at it and I switch it up. So if you haven't tried it, don't try, try an element. Try not to let it be intimidating to you. Any other words of wisdom? Anything else that you want to share?
I know one first step for me was just I started by just finding an audience for each of my assignments that I was already doing. It wasn't really the dive into PBL yet, but just that step kind of baby stepped up to it. And so just thinking, okay, who could my students present what they're learning right now to? And then going from there, that was a good starting point.
Yeah, I would say a lot of these elements were very difficult for me and really still are. Like, I've done PBLs where my driving question was not good, and that was my fault. And I didn't know, I was just learning. So, and that public product, that audience and that authenticity piece is huge, like Josh said, and finding that, until you get the hang of it, that can be hard too. I know, is anybody here from Westview Elementary School? Probably not. That was a long shot. They did an exhibition night too, which was really cool. They're part of that redesign, aren't they, Josh?
I think they took a step back from redesign, but they were initially.
Okay. I think it was during that time period when they did that exhibition night, but I know that, inviting your community in, it doesn't even necessarily just have to be parents, but that, you have people who live in your neighborhoods around your school whose kids are grown and they love to come into your school and see what's going on too. And I think that's awesome.
I think the real benefit of being home virtually teaching is now we're used to Zoom and we're used to connecting with people. So now it's not so scary to do.
Yes, totally. I know I'm still getting used to Zoom, but I'm 100% better at it than I was 2 weeks ago. Okay, so the toolkit, is that the shared document or is that something else? Just tried to get into the toolkit and there's a problem with the system. It hasn't.
Yeah, it seems to be having an issue with it there. So I have a copy of it that I'm gonna just make it so that people can view it, and then you can just make a copy of it for yourself. The links in it, you may have to like copy each link because they're just Google Docs, but it shouldn't be too difficult. So I'll put it here in the chat, and then people can click on it and access it. And then Julie, if you want to add it to the resources, feel free.
Yes, definitely. That would be awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we're about done. We're 3 minutes until 1. And does anybody have anything else they'd like to share before we sign off and maybe head to another session?
I know I did another one where it wasn't really like as deep PBL, but it's one that kids really liked. It was on abolitionist heroes and how ideas shape society. So they had to pick an abolitionist hero. They had to research what their beliefs were, and on the issue of slavery and equality, and how do they express those beliefs, and were those methods effective? And then they had to pick a comic book character that best exemplified that one and reimagine that hero, that comic book character, as that abolitionist hero. So you had to kind of merge the two together. They had to create a design for it, and then they had to pitch it to a couple other teachers who were the Marvel Comics executives in a Shark Tank style pitch about why this character best fit it. And it was neat to see just the creativity. We had one last year. They reimagined John Brown as the character Poison Ivy because of her ability to have this charismatic hold over people to convince them to do something. But what they did is they said, but Poison Ivy's female and John Brown's male. How does that work? And they came up with the idea that, well, no, in reality, what it was really Joan Brown. But because of historical bias, we don't actually write it as the women doing all of this work. And it was such a cool little twist on the character.
That's awesome. I love that. Hey, I was able to copy and paste that link, and it does work. So that's on our resources now for everybody to access. So feel free to dump things in there or on our Flipgrid. Upload your videos if you'd like to do that. Tweet out. It's been amazing. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out. I loved it.
Thanks, Julie. This was an awesome session.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, this was an awesome session.